Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, a show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. I'm your host, Chris Bartagone. With me is my co-host, Jamie Franks. We are holiday week. Jamie, welcome back to the show and happy Thanksgiving Eve.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess by the time people hear this, it will at least be Thanksgiving, if not
True.
afterwards, depending on how busy people's Thanksgiving is. But yeah, it's for a holiday week. My week has been extraordinarily busy, and we're only halfway through the week. We're recording this on a Wednesday.
Yeah, exactly.
If you didn't do the math on Thanksgiving Eve, but it is officially afternoon, so I am treating myself with a beverage and because this is ZERT, I have a skull on my whiskey glass.
So I'm also having a beverage. I'm having the coffee. Jamie's having the chaos. So there you go. Boom. Brought to you by ZERT Coffee and Chaos. Yes. So if you are listening to this today, and today being tomorrow, happy Thanksgiving to you and your families. We hope that you are enjoying the day, whether you're listening to this in the morning or afterwards, and you are wearing sweatpants because you ate too much. Enjoy this. This is a series that we are going to be doing, basically something along the lines of essential skills and gear. And this one has to do with ropes, and part two will get into the use of those ropes and knot tying. So, I go back to Boondock Saints, right? And get your fucking rope. Like the dude had to
have your stupid fucking rope.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think I talked about it in an earlier podcast. I remember traveling when I was a younger lad, and I would always have to bring rope with me. And, for whatever reason, like I needed to have rope in my backpack if we were traveling. And I can't tell you where that came from. I can't tell you if it's a movie type thing that I saw when I was growing up, but in later years, in later life, obviously going camping, going out there and just kind of doing stuff that around the house or whatnot. Obviously you're in the Navy, so you probably do a lot with ropes and tying knots and whatnot, but just in survival situations alone, understanding the type of ropes and more importantly, the type of knots, I think is a crucial piece of skill set that you should have.
Yeah, and so I'm a sailor. I've been in the Navy for over a quarter of a century. I was a Boy Scout my entire childhood, into my teenage years. I'm a diver. I'm a search and rescue guy. I'm just an outdoors kind of guy in general. And all these podcasts like make me feel really good about myself because it's either exposing the fact that I'm awesome or that I'm the biggest nerd on the planet. Like when I was in high school, I was in NJROTC, and in Boy Scouts, we did a lot with knot tying, but then in NJROTC, we did a whole unit on knot tying, and it's something that kind of, to your point, has reoccurred like kind of over and over and over again. It's come around over and over and over again throughout the different things I've done in my life, and so now at this point, I'm pretty good at it, and it's kind of to tie this. It's kind of like medical training. Like you can't get medical training once 10 years ago and then just say that you're medical trained. Like medical training is something that you need to do over and over and over and over again until you really do get good at it. And even then it's a skill that needs to be sharpened, and knot tying is kind of the same thing. But you're talking about traveling with ropes and stuff. I never really traveled with rope because I learned pretty early on through what's that? The saying is, what is it? Experience comes from it's something about experience comes from bad experiences, or
I'll think sure.
of it. Yeah, I'll come back to it. But I've kind of learned the hard way that like rope is not like a one size fits all kind of thing. Like, and when you really do start getting, especially like when I started getting into off-roading and off-road recovery, and then later on after that, when I got into like search and rescue, and when you're lifting things and pulling things,
right.
Understanding the elasticity of different types of rope.
Right.
Um, we call it a WLL, a working load limit on the different types of rope. Like that all comes into play. And so like really through my adult years, as I've gained more knowledge and experience, I've really just come to carry, like, if I need a specialized rope for something or a specialized kind of strap for something, I carry that. But other than that, man, like I'm 550 cord guy. Like I have a big spool of 550 cord that I carry with me
Yep.
everywhere. But
And
other than that, like,
sure. And that, I think that's kind of the evolution of it, right? So at one point I would bring some kind of rope, and it was whatever. I mean, whatever my father had in the garage at the time, and I thought that that was going to be what saved the day. Going forward, I mean, there was a time where everybody was wearing those paracord wrapped bracelets, right? That had the survival things in it. I still have
yeah,
mine, and mine is right now, mine's attached to one of my bags because there are still some useful pieces in there. Um, but also in that bag now contains 550 paracord,
mm-hmm.
which can be used for a lot of things. And we'll kind of discuss that. And folks, like I said, this episode today is just going to be part one of this two-part series, and then this is also going to be two parts of a larger series that we will discuss, kind of essential gear, survival gear, and training that you should need. Again, the gear being the rope, the training being how to use that rope in the situation that you need it. So to start it off, you just kind of alluded to it, Jamie, is the different types of rope to be used. You've got nylon, polyester, propylene, and kind of a natural fiber rope.
Yep.
And that about sums it up as far as the type of rope materials.
Yeah, materials. Yeah, I would say so. And then you get into the different like weaves and strand counts and
Right.
thickness and all that stuff. And I just remembered it's good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from poor judgment.
There it
That's what I
is.
was looking
Okay.
for. But and because this leads into what you were talking about, like one time I wasn't on a four-wheeling trip necessarily. I was on a camping trip that was kind of in the middle of nowhere. And this Ford Ranger was out there in the area, and I guess they got stuck somewhere and they had to walk, and they found us, and they were like, "Hey, do you guys have any rope we can borrow to get our truck out?" And all I had at the time was like the kind of rope you would use for like free climbing, or like
Yep.
mountaineering, or climbing type of rope.
Sure.
And I didn't know these people, and I didn't know where they were, and I didn't know where they were going, and they acted like they didn't really want my help. They just wanted my stuff. And so I was not willing to actually give them. I did have recovery straps, but I
Okay.
was not willing to give that to them, not knowing if they would ever come back. So I had about 100 feet of like climbing rope, and I gave them that.
Okay.
And apparently it didn't work. So that's why,
Got it.
understanding all of these things does, can really, what's that viral video, like reality hits you hard, bro?
Oh yeah. Right.
Like,
So
this is one of those things that can be very dangerous if you don't understand all
exactly.
that's at
Yeah.
play. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like you don't want to use a polyester rope for climbing, and you probably don't want to use a nylon rope for towing things because there's too much elasticity to it.
Yep.
So right off the bat is nylon, which is probably the most popular rope that is in use today. Is that probably a fair statement, right?
Yeah. And yeah, yes, I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
We're living in an age where like we're fortunate to have like all these like cutting edge materials. Like if you look back at like the historical photos of Edmund Hillary climbing Mount Everest, and like the kind, like they were just using like straight up like manila, like marlin rope.
yeah,
And like I
exactly.
look at those
Right.
pictures and I'm like,
Right.
Jesus
Oh my
Christ.
God, it could have gone
But
so bad.
yeah,
Right.
but yeah, I would say now for most applications, yeah, nylon rope is probably the most
Yeah. It,
commonly
I
used.
mean, it's strong. It stretches. Now, again, that stretch can have pros and cons to it. So it's just not in the pro or the con category. one of the pros there is it doesn't it does not get mildew. Now, you know, I think that's a fair question. Why is that important? Why is it important that your rope or whatever you want to use, cordage or whatnot, doesn't get mildew?
Ooh, I know.
Well, Jamie, I call on you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. No, it's because mildew, any type of mold or mildew that starts to develop, like, and it can even start developing inside the rope because this is another thing that being in the military, anytime we use our ropes, we lay them out in a very specific way so they get in the sun and they get dry and they get hit with direct, like UV rays so that they don't start to mildew or mold on the inside, or the outside. And that's because that will deteriorate the material of the rope. And then if you have a rope that's rated for, X amount of thousands of pounds working load limit, if it starts to get mold or mildew in it, you're taking away from that. And your rope is not going to be, if it's rated for 6,000 pounds and it's full of mildew, it's not going to hold 6,000 pounds.
It'll lose its strength.
Yeah.
One of the things that is, I guess, a downside for nylon, and we'll talk about why, is that nylon rope does not float. So again, why would you need rope that floats?
I was going to bring that later. Yeah. Right. Well, I many times in my life I have needed rope that floats, but yeah.
Okay. But and I guess it goes back to the mildew, but when wet, it loses strength. Nylon rope, when it gets wet, obviously it loses its strength, which is a real problem if you are needing that for some kind of life-saving type situation. So, we talked about, and so you talked about off-road recovery, right? So nylon rope, I mean, does it make sense to use ropes or straps and I guess there's probably an argument to be made for both, right?
Not really. I think I'm pretty secure in saying that that anybody that knows anything, that's actually educated on the subject, it's universally agreed upon that for towing or pulling or anything like that, strap is best. And then you get into like winching or lifting, like with a crane or a winch,
right?
Then like a cylindrical type of rope or cable does become preferable, but it's because the shape of it is going around a reel, and something that's round and cylindrical, like if you cut a rope and look at it from the end, it's a circle, whereas a strap obviously isn't. It's not going to twist or tangle and stuff like that. But and when you're recovering a vehicle, and like, again, like there's man, honestly, this is so fascinating, really and truly, and there's so much at play here. But yeah, like the shape of a strap, it has to do with distribution of energy.
Sure.
And they have ones that because of the material and the width and the way it's woven. So which one is that? Woven? I think woven sounds good.
Woven.
It can be more, more or less elastic. And when you're in a ground vehicle, like trying to pull out another stuck ground vehicle, you actually want that elasticity because you want to build kinetic energy within the strap, and you want it to be distributed over a greater surface area, right. On and on and on. And so that makes it safer. And, now there's nylon straps and ropes that are interwoven with Kevlar. And that's so if the line parts, which that's how we sailors say break, the line parts. If it parts, it breaks, it doesn't snap back, which, that's a whole other thing that's why, like, in the when we're talking about like towing or vehicle recovery, anything, like, again, like people will say, don't ever use a hook, like use a shackle, like a screw shackle or something like that, but don't ever use a hook, because
right,
depending on the line of the strap you're using, it can part and then it snaps back, and then now it has either a hook or a broken half of a hook on the end of it, and that
embedded in your shin.
or the back of your skull.
Right. Yeah.
There was I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you could still find it somewhere on the internet, but there was a video that went around probably 10 or 15 years ago of it was like a Jeep and a Land Rover, and the guy in the Jeep was stuck in the mud, and the Land Rover was recovering him, and he was using a nylon rope with a hook on the end of it, and it snapped or came undone and snapped back like a rubber band and went right through the back window and like I said, went right into the back of the guy's skull and killed him.
Jesus.
So when you when you think about like a rope or a strap that's rated, again, just off the top of my head, that's rated for 6,000 pounds or whatever, that's the forces that are at work when you're trying to tow something or pull something or lift something. Just because a static object weighs 1,000 pounds, when you're snatching on it to try to, I don't know, what does an F-150 weigh? 3,000 pounds.
Yeah, whatever. It's
Um,
that's a quarter
but
ton, right?
yeah,
Which their math doesn't make any sense,
yeah.
but
Well,
that's fine.
when they say like it's a quarter ton, that's the towing capacity, but the truck itself weighs, about 3,000 pounds or whatever. But when
Right.
you have another 3,000 pound vehicle that's accelerating at 10 to 15 miles an hour, trying to free it from the mud, that one 3,000 pound vehicle trying to pull another 3,000 pound vehicle, it's not a proportional increase, it's an exponential increase of the force
Right.
that's on that strap or the rope that you're using. So like I said, this
Right.
is a very fascinating subject with many
Well,
layers that goes really deep.
of course,
Yeah.
and I think
So
straps are obviously, we're talking about straps as far as a towing type situation, as a off-road recovery type situation. If you're doing a lot of overlanding, I'm sure anybody that has a truck, a Jeep, an off-road vehicle has some form of ratchet straps in their vehicle. They're
we
great
don't
for
want to use
tying things down.
yes,
Well,
ratchet straps are good for
right,
cargo, but not
exactly, not towing straps. So
yeah.
there's ratchet straps for for tying down cargo. There's towing straps for towing a vehicle, and that's that falls into a different category than obviously what we're talking about for ropes here. Could you
But
use a rope for towing? Yes, if that was the only thing you had, I'm sure that there is one form of rope that you could use.
well, in my current role, I'm a hovercraft pilot in the Navy, and
Mhm.
we do have a procedure, and it's something we actually train to and exercise quite often. Is if I have to take my hovercraft out and tow a disabled hovercraft, we use a it's not a strap, it's a rope, but it's about a 4-inch diameter
Right.
carbon
Yeah.
Kevlar
Yeah.
rope that we
Much.
use because the hovercraft I'm flying weighs 70 tons, and I'm towing another 70-ton hovercraft over water. And so we're
Right.
using this 4-inch diameter carbon Kevlar rope, which probably costs more than you and I make in a year. So,
Exactly.
uh,
So what are some of the benefits of needing the rope to be able to float?
well, it's
Or
if
I'm
you
sorry, what are some of the reasons why you would need that rope to float?
if you're not going to use the rope, and this is kind of going back to one of the very first points that I glossed over. Um, Specific ropes and specific straps are made for specific applications for a specific reason. So,
Right.
whatever you're doing, you really do need to make sure you have the correct type of rope for your application, and make sure it's rated adequately and all that stuff. Just don't go to the hardware store and buy generic rope and think this rope is going to be good for everything.
Right.
In reality, it's not. But if you're not going to use the rope in an aquatic environment, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't need to float. But in search and rescue, we use a very specific polypropylene rope because it floats. We have we call it a shot bag that we can attach to the end of the rope because in certain search and rescue applications, we don't want it to float, or we want to lower it down from a helicopter, and we want it to lower straight down instead of getting blown out by the rotor wash and stuff like that. So because polypropylene line, it does float, but it's also even though it's rated for a decent weight, the rope
It's
itself is
lightweight.
pretty light.
Yeah.
So but when I'm sending that line out to a rescue swimmer, it's going to hit the water, and if it didn't float, it would just basically sink down and eventually become a straight line. And also,
Right.
um, ropes and lines that are rated and intended for use that for floating and in a maritime environment, um, they're also made out of a material that doesn't absorb water. That's another thing you need to think about if you're going to use your rope or line in a wet environment. Is the material of the rope going to absorb water? Because if it does, it's going to become way heavier and way more difficult to manage. So, in search and rescue, we typically favor in the Navy. It's not even a choice or an option. Like we shall use this very specific type of line that floats. And like I said, it's made out of polypropylene. And that's so when we're sending it out to a swimmer or a boat or lowering it down from a helicopter or whatever, that it's going to float on the surface and make it easier for the rescuer to be able to get a hold of it without diving down or
Got it.
needing to dive down or sinking or floating away. And
Okay.
for river rescue, if you're trying to rescue somebody that's in swift water, moving
Sure.
water,
Yeah.
you want to be able to float that line on the surface and kind of guide it to where it needs to go
Okay.
without it sinking beneath the surface. And then, again, this is honestly is kind of an extreme example, but it's a good example. When me and a big 70-ton Navy hovercraft needs to tow another 70-ton Navy hovercraft, we don't want that rope sinking beneath the surface and getting entangled in
Okay.
anything that might be beneath the surface. When
Yeah.
if we're in shallow water or littoral water, we don't really know what's beneath the surface, and so we want the rope to stay on the surface so it doesn't get entangled in anything below. So
Yeah.
there
Makes
are
sense.
many reasons why you
Yeah.
might want a rope to float, but again, if you're not going to use it in a water environment, then that's not something you need. Like
Right.
you and
Yeah. So
again, it just goes to
understand.
show
Yeah.
that there's
Go ahead.
not one rope that fits everything. That's all.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So understand what you're going to be using it for
yep.
is the best way to kind of sum that up. The next rope material, probably the second most popular. I'm not sure how it ranks really, but is a polyester material, which is almost as strong as nylon, but it doesn't have the stretch. So, where would you probably, I think for climbing rope, it's all nylon rope. You would not want this in that type of situation.
Um,
Or maybe you would. I mean,
no, that
what are
like
some of the,
in a again, it really does come down a lot on the specific application you're using because some climbing rope. This is also why climbing ropes come in different colors,
sure.
so you can differentiate. This one it does have some elasticity. This one does have some stretch, and this one doesn't because in some climbing applications you don't want stretch
Yeah,
or
yeah,
elasticity.
exactly. Too
So
much, yeah, too much.
yeah.
Exactly. You're right. You're right. You're right. Um, the polyester rope, I guess one of its main benefits is that it does not lose its strength when it gets wet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's if again, based off of what task you're trying to use this for, what job that you're trying to do it for, that's obviously one of the big benefits. So if it is going to get wet, if you are doing a lot of stuff outdoors, whether it is building a shelter or camping and whatnot, obviously, and that's going to support any weight, you want to consider that. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, and are you using it in a static application? Meaning, are you
Sure.
using it to secure something, tie something down,
Yeah.
lift something up, or is it going to be used in like a dynamic situation, like again, like climbing rope, where it's going to be rubbing against the side of a rock face, or is it going to be going through
Right.
a winch or anything like that? And then so therein, the material is important because how abrasion resistant is it? Because again,
Yeah.
using my extreme application of a Navy LCAC towing another Navy LCAC, I need a rope that can support that much tension, that much weight, that much load. It needs to float, blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't need to be abrasion resistant because we're towing over water.
So
So,
yeah, exactly.
so
Now, but polyester rope, and when it gets wet, it can get very, very slippery. So would
Mhm.
that come into play in that type of situation? I mean, what obviously if you're you're trying to hold a person's weight or whatnot on belay, and you don't want something slippery that's going to slide through your hands. But is there so that is that the fact that it gets slippery, could that be a benefit as well as a point against?
I've never used and I've used lots of ropes, and I think quite honestly, now that I think about it, probably most of my like actual like legitimate use of ropes and straps has been in a wet environment. Um, we have tools that you can like kind of put on the rope, and it'll fake the rope back and like double it back on itself, and you can hold it that way.
Got it.
So the fact that it's slippery doesn't really come into play. But you did remind me of something else. Is there are certain types of rope that, because of the way they're woven, won't pick up debris, and that's
Oh, okay.
important if you're
Sure.
handling ropes or cables with your hands. You don't
Yes.
want any type of rope that's going to pick up and hold debris if it's slipping through your hand, because then as it slips through your hand, it's going to cut your hand. But
Yeah.
like that's one of the standard Navy things that they teach you, like day 2 in boot camp is hand over hand all lines. Don't ever let ropes or lines like slip through your hand. But no, I would say like the application is more important than something like the rope being slippery. Again, like as a rescue swimmer and using that polypropylene line that floats. I mean, because of what it's made out of, and because of the fact that we do want it to float and we don't want it to absorb water and become heavy. And we wear gloves, and like I said, we have a special tool that we can kind of hook onto the line, and it doubles the line back on itself and makes a little handle.
Sure.
And we can handle it that way.
Oh, what are some different uses, or what are that would distinguish between the need to use a polyester rope versus a nylon rope? Any that come to your mind immediately, like why
No.
you would choose one over the other?
And the only thing that comes to mind is, do I want the rope to be, elastic, have elasticity, have stretch, or do I not? And that's
Sure.
really the only thing I can really think of.
Okay.
If
Now,
I'm doing a static pull, like a winch pull, you don't want elasticity. If you're doing a dynamic pull, where that kinetic energy is going to help you, you do want elasticity. And then, like, you can do a combination, but if you're anchoring, if you're pulling and you need to anchor to like a solid object, like a tree or a big rock, you do want elasticity in the tow rope, but you don't want elasticity to the rope or the strap that you're anchored with. So um, that's really the biggest thing I can think of where that differentiation would really become important. And then again, there may be some types of application where temperature comes into play. Like if the rope is going to be winding around something or rubbing against something, and temperature get comes into play, where now we're getting into like the melting point of the two different materials. But that's
sure.
kind of a
Well, and then I guess the opposite side of that spectrum, climbing Everest versus climbing someplace in Arizona, is
mhm.
that do you need a different type of rope based on cold? Cold and obviously snow, ice. You talk about the moisture side of things as well. So you discussed and I mentioned it in the beginning about one of the different type of rope materials of propylene, and then you said polypropylene. Is there a difference between the two?
I I'm not smart enough to know the difference if there is one.
Okay.
I
All right.
I I read what they tell me to read in the Navy manual, and I memorize it so that I can tell
Got
somebody else when they're wrong. But other than that, I'm definitely that's a little farther than what
Sure.
where
No, that's
my
fine. I
expertise
mean,
goes. So I know how
and
to.
propylene rope is a cheap alternative, or a cheaper alternative to a nylon in braided ropes.
Mhm.
Now, the word cheap is always a very, very it's always walking a fine line of, do you want something cheap, right? Because are you talking about cheap in quality, cheap in price? And when it comes to something that is going to uh, be used to help protect, secure, preserve your life? Do you want something cheap? So be careful in the terminology that is used, right? Cheap versus less expensive versus, again, okay, I'll take a cheaper price on something, but I don't want cheaper, you know, mark or what's the word I'm looking for here? Um, I
I
don't want
think
to be
inexpensive versus cheap, because cheap kind of speaks to quality also, and
right,
yeah,
and I don't want I don't want cheap craftsmanship.
right. And
So
so as a consumer though, this is one of those things that you have to think about. Like I say this about the firearms industry all the time. I've always said the firearms industry is the last industry in America where the saying "you get what you pay for" still holds true. Everything in the firearms industry, ammunition, the firearms themselves, optics. Let's just take that one for example. Optics.
yeah,
Let's say you have two optics side by side. They're both 1:6 power magnification. They're both illuminated reticle. They're both 30 millimeter tubes. They're both made out of aluminum. There is a reason why. There is a legitimate reason why this one costs $1,800, and there's a reason why this one costs $350.
sure.
Then
Yeah,
on the
you're right.
surface, they would appear to be equivalent, but the firearms industry is the last industry, one of the last industries that holds true. You get what you pay for. Like, there is a valid reason why these two things that seem equivalent, why this one is expensive and this one costs less. And
Right,
kind of with ropes is the same thing. It's like this inexpensive rope that's you look at the label or whatever, and it's made out of the same material according to the label, and it's the same length, and it's the same weight, and it's the same color, and it looks the same, and it feels the same. Why is this one more expensive than this one? And like I can tell you, like going back earlier, like with the toe straps and recovery straps, I look for very certain things. I look for the way this strap is stitched together. What is the strap made out of? What is the stitching made out of? What is the working load limit? Is the working load limit printed on the strap? And is there a tag that tells me what the working load limit was, when it was tested, and tested by whom? And like all of those things, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but that's a good
right.
example of
Yeah,
this company made a product and they made it to a very specific standard, and they tested it to that standard, and it was tested by an independent third party, which wasn't free, by the way. And
right,
so, and now they're selling you this product that
right.
has actually been weighed and tested and certified, and it's made by this material. And this other one that costs less, we
Yep.
don't
No.
know. And
Right.
how much is your life worth to you? Is your
Exactly.
life worth 50
Right.
more dollars to buy this one than this one? So
Listen, that's a valid point, and that's something that I hope everybody takes into consideration. They make a mental note of that. Like, be be very, very careful when you ask for a cheap product or a cheaper product. Understand that you may be getting cheaper quality, not just cheaper price. With
yeah, and
Go
sorry,
ahead.
like there are certain things that like I consider, and I look at it through the lens, and I run it through the filter, and I consider it life-saving equipment. So
Yeah.
like I say I used to be. My license is still valid and everything. I just never do it anymore. But like I used to be an avid skydiver. I'm a scuba diver. A recovery strap for off road. Armor plates for your body armor. Like
Right.
all of these things are life saving equipment. So
Right.
these are the things I don't want to skimp on, because like I told you earlier, I have literally seen a video of somebody getting killed by using substandard recovery equipment. So
Yeah.
when you frame it like that, this toe strap that you keep in the back of your truck could be life-saving equipment.
Yeah.
And like that's not where I'm going to go bargain hunting.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So propylene rope, like we said, it's a cheaper alternative to nylon, and as you stated before, the polypropylene, it is more lightweight
Mm,
uh, uh, um, in material, so it's a lighter rope. It does float. So again, talking back or referring back to what you said,
mhm.
it does not stretch as much. Is that, and that's in your experience as well?
Yeah, and again and again and again, like that's not the application we're using it for. So
Sure.
with ropes and lines in general, we have a term that's often used is called a messenger.
Okay.
So if I need to get a rope, let's
Yep.
say let's say you're on one side of the river, I'm on the other side of the river. This river is 50 yards across, right? And I
Yep.
need to send a line over to you. I'm going to use a messenger, which is a smaller, lighter line that I can attach to a rock or a
Right.
ball or a carabiner or something, and I can whip it around like Wonder Woman and throw it across the river. And because it's lightweight, it's going to make it the 50 yards across to you. Then you can pull that across, and I can attach it
Yeah.
to a slightly larger line and then a slightly larger one until we get to the big line that we can use to support your body weight as you cross the river and whatever. So, in search and rescue, anyway, that was a longer explanation. But in search and rescue, we use those polypropylene lines that float. We use that kind of as a messenger line. Like that's not ever going to be the line that we actually use to hoist somebody up or lift anybody or anything like that. So yeah, so
Okay.
again, it comes back to the specific application. We're using this specific line for a specific reason.
Right.
And then when it
And
comes time to lift somebody up to the helicopter, we're going to use something different. So,
right. And that the propylene is not as strong as the other ones
no.
that we mentioned.
And
And
it,
one of the other things that they talked about as it being a negative is that it degrades in sunlight.
yep, that's correct. So, and again, we have a Navy standard and a Navy instruction and a manual that tells us how to do everything. And yes, we keep that polypropylene line in a covered canvas bag when we're not using it, so it doesn't
Right.
get
So,
UV rays.
take that into a survival situation and you're using that as uh, uh, to secure a shelter or something to keep something in place, and expose long-term exposure to sunlight will help deteriorate that rope and
Mm-hmm.
then cause problems down the road. The last type of rope material is that natural fiber
Yep.
rope.
Yeah, organic fiber rope. Yep.
Yep. Hemp, cotton sisal, I guess that's how you pronounce it. The stuff that Tom Hanks used
Manila.
on Manila. Yeah, the stuff that Tom Hanks used on the island with Wilson. And it's funny. Last night I was out to dinner, and the conversation came up about uh, Lord of the Flies. The book is being read, and the question was asked about, what would you do first? And one of the answers was talking about making some kind of lashing, if you will, or cordage, and how you could do that on an island. And that obviously that depends on what island you're at and what kind of stuff is out there. But um, this natural type of rope would be best for used or best used in a survival type situation where you do not have the luxury of the nylon rope. You don't have your bag of rope. You weren't told that you could have your fucking rope.
So earlier when I said there's really no rope or line that's like a one size fits all, one type of rope for any application. Um, Forget that. No, I'm kidding. No, but the best, honestly, the best kind of catch all rope that can do a little bit of everything. The Swiss Army knife of ropes would be this natural fiber rope.
Yeah.
And again, like it really does blow my mind, and I really do think it's funny or find it amusing or find it interesting, however you want to say it. Like when you look back at those old pictures of the first people to summit Mount Everest, and you look at the equipment and stuff that they're using. And I love to go to national parks and go to museums and stuff. And in Grand Teton National Park, they had this exhibit of that had like all this climbing gear from like the first people to summit those mountains. And it's uh they were using this natural fiber rope, and it's not the best for anything necessarily, but it's like pretty good for everything. It has a lot of the characteristics we're talking about, like where it has a little bit of elasticity. under moderate strain. I mean, obviously, if you put two extremely heavy objects on each end, it will part and snap back and all that stuff. But for most pedestrian applications, like it has a little bit of stretch, but not too much. It's pretty weather resistant. It's pretty resistant to moisture. It's pretty strong. It's, and on and on and on. So this would be the best type of rope to get for kind of a general, just in case I need it for something someday, somewhere kind of application.
Okay. And I think what's so interesting about this kind of rope material is it comes down to that survival setting, that situation where you are out in the wilderness, you may not have the supplies that you need, and this is what can be used. And the reason why is it's where it's kind of interesting to me is it lends you to learn more about that type of scenario, that type of situation or surrounding or geography, right? So understanding the type of trees that are out there, understanding how to make, and we joked about it, or we referred to the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, and wondering if you can make cordage or lashings like that from the I don't want, it's not bark, right? It's not, because bark, but he was peeling off what is that? What was he peeling off? I guess it was bark,
Yeah, I
but he
guess
was
you would call it bark. Yeah.
bark, right?
Yeah.
I just, when I refer to bark, I think of the, hardened bark that you can use when it comes to other things as far as, starting fires or whatnot. But he uses that. And then obviously he braids that together, which is, and we'll get into that down the road in a little bit here about the way that rope is kind of constructed. But it makes you have a deeper understanding of trees and plants. And with that will also come, potential uses for other uses for plants, you know, and with that also nuts and berries and things that you can eat is also great knowledge to have in a survival type situation.
So
um
back in 2016, I took 5 weeks off work, and in the, what was that, like kind of the summer of 2016, and I spent a month in the Andes Mountains in Peru, and like hiking up, all these. We hiked this glacier that was at like 28,000 feet, and I did the 5-day trek to Machu Picchu, and I did all these other. We hiked up to the Rainbow Mountain, and like I had to I had to take these pills for altitude sickness and all this kind of stuff. But
okay.
one of our guides showed us that there's this type of bush that like grows in the mountains up there, and he did this demonstration, and I have a video of it. And if anybody's interested, maybe I can find it, and I'll send it to you, Chris, and you can post it
Sure.
up somewhere. But
Yeah.
one of our guides, like, he's like explaining to us that there's this type of bush that has these leaves, and you can take the leaves and you like spin it in your hands like this, and it basically sloughs off all the green matter and leaves you with this like fibrous stuff. And then, like, in literally less than 5 minutes time, he picked off these leaves, rubbed them in his hand, reduced it down to its fiber, and braided it together. And like I said, literally in probably 5 minutes time, he had braided together 10 or 12 feet of this rope. And he made it out of nothing, made it out of
Yeah.
nowhere. I made it out of this little plant that we just happened to come across. And he's like, "Hey guys, here's something that you might find interesting." And like, we put, like four adult males, like two on this side, two on that side, and we like played tug of war with this rope that this guy made out of nothing in less than 5 minutes, and it was like
Yeah.
this really strong rope.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's what's really interesting. There is stuff out there, and that just comes with a whole nother set of skills that are, I think, are clutch to have to becoming an outdoorsman or
Yeah.
a survivalist, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
would say that's up there with like knowing how to dress an animal, like you kill an animal and knowing how to dress that animal. I mean, I would say this is like up there with that.
yeah, 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 100%. Um, it's obviously the main benefit of this type of rope is that it is inexpensive. Um, but again, I don't know if that is a pro or a con. I mean, it's a it is a characteristic. We'll just leave it as that. The problem though is that it is success. Wow, we cannot talk. It is definitely the Thursday before or the night before Thanksgiving.
Well, you're
You
drinking
will
coffee. You don't have an excuse. I have a little
yeah.
excuse.
You will have to
I'm
deal with rot and mildew.
I'm not slurring my
So
words. I'm speaking in
uh,
cursive. It's
that's
classy.
right. That is it. So because of its natural fibers, you will have to deal with that.
But also, so with its natural fibers, it may be susceptible to mildew or mold, but you can also burn it. You can also use it for
Yes.
fire starting, and a lot of
So
the like the nylon and Kevlar and polypropylene and all those you would not be able to use them for fire starting, but natural
correct.
fiber rope you can. So
Yeah.
that
So
is
there
another
you go.
aspect of survival.
Yep. The uh, I guess one of the other things, and whether it's again a pro or a con or just a characteristic of the rope, is that when it will fray and it will shrink when wet. And I think it goes back to, I believe this goes back to Native Americans, or maybe I don't know. This is going to sound awkward, but a torture technique of tying that rope around a person's neck, and when it gets wet it starts to shrink, and then it starts to cut off airway and circulation. I remember
So
reading that somewhere.
you're and it's like it sounds like you have like a slight misunderstanding. So if you let's say we have an organic fiber rope that's 10 feet long, right?
Yeah.
Under neutral circumstances. When I get it wet, it will expand to 12 feet long, but then after it dries, it will shrink down to 8. So I could take my rope, however much rope, and I could wet it, and then I could tie you up with it. And then as it dries, it's going to shrink up. And then, then it's going to be torturous because it's going to become tighter as it dries after it's been wet. So, yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Maybe I was wrong with that story. It was not an Aesop's fable.
You're correct. It was just, it
delivered wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe there's bourbon in my coffee.
But no, the rope will stretch when it's wet, but then after it dries, it will become shorter than it originally was. So
awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate. See, that's why I have Jamie on the show, guys. I mean,
that is why we've waited all this time for that.
Exactly. He's the fact checker. He looks good, and that's
not
the main.
Today. I was 70 feet under the ocean like an hour ago. So
well, that's all right. Still working. Still looking good. Guys, we said that this was going to be a two-part thing, and the second part is going to be more using the types of rope that we talk about, some knots. Obviously, that's a very visual type video. This series has ZERT has done this series before in the past. I think they did a series when it was Coffee and Hate, and there was some rope and not tying, not rope tying, but rope tying. But there was some rope and knot knowledge that was passed on through in a video form. How about we'll put it that way?
Were they tying nooses since it was Coffee and Hate? But
no, they were not. They were not.
Okay.
And again, this goes back to, you're talking way back in 2015, 2016, when that series and this series was in that iteration. So we've moved it to Coffee and Chaos, and I got the coffee and you got the chaos. So as far as rope construction, I'm sorry.
No, never mind. I was going to make a bad
joke. As far as rope construction, there's many, I guess there's quite a few ways, but there's three main categories when it comes to how ropes are constructed, manufactured, twisted, braided, and I'm going to pronounce this probably all wrong, but Kermantle. Does that sound familiar to you?
Nope. Yeah, that's a new one for me.
Yeah, look at that. So I know that you've talked about it, but and I guess the answer has already been out there as well, but does the Navy use a specific kind of rope, or it just depends on the job?
So the Navy uses 10,000 different ones, and it 100% depends on the application. I mean, and when we're talking about um, tying an aircraft carrier up to a pier, I mean, like that's a real thing. When an aircraft carrier that's, if you took the Empire State Building and laid it on its side, I mean, our modern aircraft carriers are bigger than that, and we're
Yeah,
taking this floating object that's bigger than the Empire State Building and tying it to a pier. We have a specific type of rope that's made out of a specific type of material that's made just for that. When you're lowering Jamie Franks out of a helicopter, that's a specific cable that's made out of a specific material that was made for that specific reason. And then when I swim out to a survivor, and then I
sure.
request that the helicopter send down the Stokes basket so that I can, like, that's a different thing for a different reason. I mean, and I could go on and on and on. So but kind of going back to what we talked about a minute ago, every squadron, every ship, every unit that I've ever been attached to, the kind of the one, every unit has it for kind of a catch-all, is we call it Marlin or Manila, and you have these big spools of this Marlin or this Manila line, that is kind of a catch-all. But also, like, back to another point that we made, it's also like disposable. Like, we'll use it on a temporary basis for this application or that application, knowing that it's going to deteriorate or that it's going to shrink over time or whatever. And then we have a specific periodicity where now we have to go out there and cut that off and
Got it.
retie this thing or rewrap or whatever it is, whatever the application is. So, but no, the Navy, we use all kinds of different lines, different ropes, different materials for all different things. It goes
Okay.
from tying up an aircraft carrier all the way down to,
To lowering Jamie Franks out of a
yep,
helicopter.
yep.
Again, it's pretty self-explanatory. Twisted ropes, it's probably the most common. It's normally made with three strands twisted together. Where braided rope has many fibers, they're all in the same direction. The rope will stay straight versus, and that's one way to tell, right? So that was one of the things, how to tell if you have a twisted rope versus a braided rope. When you try and lay it flat, one will lay flat or stay straight, if you will, not
Right.
lay flat, stay straight, where the other will kind of curl up. Um, when it comes to braided, there's a few different types: single, double, and solid braided. So those are all things that you should probably understand if you are going out and getting rope for a certain task. Um, so Kern Mantle, what I have for you here is it's a special type of twisted core and a braided shell. So it's kind of, I guess,
Okay.
a hybrid. It can be very dynamic or static depending on the core material.
Well,
So
that honestly, the when you read that description, the first thing that pops into my mind is like 550 cord, because that's kind of how 550 cord is. It's braided on the outside, and it has the inner strands that are twisted. And 550 cord gets its name because it's rated to a load limit of 550 pounds.
there it
But you
is.
can also do what's called gutting the 550 cord, which is where you cut it and you
Yep.
open it up and you pull all the inner strands or that inner core, as you just described, out. But now it's not 550 pounds anymore. But now you can use those inner strands for other things, because those inner strands are also made out of different materials that have different attributes and different strengths all their own. But the whole thing together is, I think that's what you just described. I would be interested to see if
That is
550 cord falls into the Kermantle definition.
That is 100% exactly what it is. So basically, paracord is an example of Kern Mantle rope.
Bamsis.
I think also some of the rock climbing rope it falls under that category as well.
And I
But
think, like, the towing rope that I described earlier that we use, I bet that is as well, because as I said, it's carbon Kevlar,
yep,
and it's the outer layers is woven carbon fiber material, and the
sure,
inner core is the Kevlar material.
yeah,
So yeah, I
okay.
bet you that is too. But that's a new term to me.
Yeah, there it
Have
is.
to look that
See,
up.
I
Yeah.
that's my purpose was today, to teach you a new vocabulary word. Um, I really foresee myself enjoying these series because it gives us something to, it just gives you another, tool in the toolbox, if you will, a skill set, whether you take this all the way to becoming a master at tying different types of knots, or whether you just figure out a new way to tie down something that you're hauling in the back of your truck, whatever that is. This is the kind of the wrap up of part one of this, and then next week, what I want to get into is what are some of the different uses for each one of those ropes that we
Mhm.
talked about, and then kind of what knots are used, because it's great, you can have all the rope in the world, if you do not know how to use that rope in an effective manner, you are not going to be towing anything, you're not going to be lowering Jamie Franks down. Jamie Franks is going to be lowering by gravity alone if the incorrect knot is used, right? So I think those are some pretty important skills to learn with the gear that we discussed in today's episode.
Yeah, and I have a friend and I met him through the off-road community is where I originally met him. But
Okay.
he was prior military. He was in the Air Force. He got out of the Air Force. I can't remember if he retired. That's not important. But he was in the Air Force and then was not. And he got a job in, like, the way he terms it. These are his words. Like, he works in the lifting industry.
Okay.
And like all of this stuff, like a lot of what I know about the technical side of everything that we've discussed here today, with ropes and straps and working load limits and elasticity and all that stuff, is really stuff that I learned from him. And
Okay.
he this just this guy's knowledge of this type of stuff and applying it to the, as he calls it, the lifting industry, but understanding what types of ropes and what types of straps and what types of fittings and what types of hardware that you're going to use to lift this thing or pull this thing. This guy makes a very, very good living off of this information, and then you can take it from that all the way down to like basic survival skills. And at the top of the show, when we were describing, like, this is going to be the first part in a series, I almost said, because we were talking about basic skills, and I almost said, like, I almost tied it into like man skills or manly skills, but it really isn't. Like, this is stuff. I hope not all of our listeners are men, and I
Well,
hope women are
well,
especially paying attention. And this is stuff that's
true.
like useful for everybody. Like,
It is, but one of the things you talked about at the top of the show is you learned this in Boy Scouts.
mhm.
So this was being taught way back when, and I don't know what they teach in Girl Scouts. I'm hoping that they teach some of the same things and they just don't sell the amazing cookies, but these are some of those skills that you should be not only learning yourself, but hopefully teaching younger people as they grow up. Just
Yeah, and
if you like to go camping and you need to understand how to tie a guy line, like, there you
yeah,
go. First
and that's a
start.
good thing. That's a great thing for somebody out there to give us feedback on. Like, is this
Sure.
stuff taught in Girl Scouts? Because if it's not, it should be.
Right.
But like, to this point, this is one of the, like, I just made a post on my Facebook, my personal Facebook page, a couple of years ago, and it was kind of a benign statement slash question, and it was like, I stopped short of saying it went viral, but it's like one of the Facebook posts that I made on my personal Facebook page that got the most amount of comments and likes and interactions ever. And I just simply asked, like, why don't women carry a pocket knife? Like, I I've carried a pocket knife in my pocket every single day, everywhere I've gone since I was 6 years old. Why don't women carry a pocket knife? And
Yeah.
like, because this stuff isn't man skills. That's, it
No,
one has
it's not.
nothing to do with the other. These are things
The
that are,
life, well, life skills.
they are life skills, they are life saving skills, and they are valid and applicable to
Yeah.
everyone. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So awesome. Well, again, folks, we thank you very much. If you did take the time to listen to this on Thanksgiving when the show was released, we appreciate you. We hope you are enjoying some relaxing time and you had some good turkey, cranberry sauce, stuffing, whatever it is you did. But we hope you enjoyed it with your family, and thank you for spending some of your time with us today. We will see you next week. Be safe this weekend, and do not get into any altercations at Walmart. And if you do witness them, make sure you turn your phone sideways, because that's gives you the best video quality. So until then, folks, you stay safe, and we'll talk to you next time. Jamie?
Don't burn your house down with a turkey fryer. If you're going to burn a house down with your turkey fryer, make sure it's somebody else's house. And other than that, it's easy to be hard and it's hard to be smart. Get training.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys. Talk to you.
Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving.